Okay, we're having a discussion that's starting on the role of pastors, the role of the pastor. And in order to have a conversation about the role of the pastor, we have to kind of tie this discussion to the historical role of pastors. And so we have to look at the images of the pastor. What are the historical images of pastors? And then from that, then begin to look at the current, the types of pastors historically there have been in terms of the different roles the pastor plays. But before we talk about the roles of pastor, let's talk about the 21st century or contemporary images of pastor. I'm going to go through these rather briefly, and you can have discussions on them. See if you recognize some of these images, not roles, but images of a pastor in contemporary society and for ministry. So the first type is a media mogul. The media mogul, that's the one where he's basically a ministry pastor, a media pastor. You don't know what he or she does in ministry, or even if they have ministries. There is actually one of the larger congregations is a congregation that has no church. The pastor basically does everything online and in media. People watch his videos, and that's it. So the media mogul is one image of a pastor. Another one is the political negotiator. Example of this might be the Reverend Al Sharpton, perhaps Jesse Jackson helping get the captives released, prisoners released earlier with Ayatollah Khomeini and those types of things. But the political negotiator, this is the person that does their ministry is about politics and negotiating and that sort of thing. The next type is the therapist, the pastor who is a therapist. His or her focus is on healing and counseling and giving advice that makes us feel better and function better. We live in a therapeutic culture. It is a culture of I can fix myself if I have the right book or the right video, and if I take these 3 steps, I can be whole. So there are many pastors whose focus is on the therapist. There's the image of the therapist as pastor. Then there is the manager. Pastor is a leader of a complex volunteer organization. It's not a church. It is the pastor as a leader of a complex volunteer organization that does many things, not necessarily all spiritual matters, but it is an organization that does many good works. But is a pastor as a manager, not seen as a spiritual leader, but as a manager of people processes. And then the pastor as resident activist. This is the pastor that is always in the community, active in what's going on in the community, and he represents the church through his or her activities in the world and in the community. They are the resident activists. They are the spokesperson, the person who stands guard for the weak and the oppressed. Then, of course, there is pastor as preacher. In many of our churches, we see that the primary function of pastor is to preach on Sunday mornings. Some people actually call the pastor the preacher. We've got a couple of folks at Word and Worship that refer to me as the preacher. Hey, preacher. That's what they see the pastor as, being the guy who preaches on Sunday morning. Those other roles are not significant to them, but the preaching role is. And certainly there are a lot of churches in our context that have pastors and congregations who see the pastor as primarily being preacher. And then the final image, modern day 21st century image of a pastor, is that of servant. Pastor as servant. I have a friend who calls himself servant rather than pastor. That is a person who is basically, he is a minister who serves. He's doing the hospital visitations. He's doing counseling sessions. He's doing all the family stuff. This person is a model minister doing ministry type things and is serving the table. He is doing communion, all the things that are to serve people. So the idea of the grace among you must become the servant of the least. And so these are the primary images of a pastor, of ministry. And so how do we take these and start with these and draw on them to start to identify what are the roles of pastor that are significant to us? Now, the next step after discussing these 21st century images of pastors in terms of what we've seen, we then will move to looking at the different roles of pastors, the biblical roles of pastors, and then the discussion can go from there into how do we see the local role of pastor. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Enjoy your classes. God bless you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.